الحمد لله رب العالمين نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا والصلاة والسلام على محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Imagine yourself that you're stood before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls you forth, and you're thinking to yourself, and now it's my turn to be accounted for my sins. But to your surprise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to you, Iqra. Iqra, what does this mean? Read. Iqra, to read. And you're thinking, on this dreaded day, when all of my actions have come to an end, is there something left? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again says, Iqra warqa warattil kama kunta turattilu fi dunya fa inna manzilataka inda akhiri ayatin taqra'uha. Read and recite and elevate up the levels of Jannah. For verily the last verse that you recite, there will be your abode and your home, your destination. So you start reciting. And by the way, this person that will be called forth is not a person who has memorized Surah Al-Fatiha and a few surahs from the Qur'an. You cannot say on that day that I can come and recite a surah that I know, I have memorized. For example, Surah Al-Rahman or Surah Yasin or Surah Al-Mulk or a few surahs here and there. You will not be allowed or permitted to come up and recite from the Qur'an which is incomplete. And this is only for that person who will start to recite from the beginning of the Qur'an and go all the way up to Surah Al-Nas and say min al-jinnati wan-nas. And by this time, what do you think? Which level of Jannah has he reached? Al-Firdaus al-A'la, which is the highest level. And according to this hadith, the scholars have also explained this hadith and derived a ruling from this hadith by saying that the number of ayat in the Qur'an are those of the levels of Jannah. The number of ayat in the Qur'an are those of the levels of Jannah. So for every verse that you have memorized and recite and act upon, you will elevate one level in Jannah for that ayah that has been memorized. And this person doesn't only stop there. When he finally reaches the destination of Al-Firdaus al-A'la, above him is only the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَرَى الْمَلَائِكَةَ حَافِّينَ مِنْ حَوْلِ الْعَرْشِ. And he will see the angels surrounding the arsh of Ar-Rahman, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels surrounding the throne. And doing what? يُسَبِّحُونَ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِمْ, praising their Lord. And it will be said to that person upon entering this place, سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ طِبْتُمْ. Peace be upon you, you have done very well. فَادْخُلُوهَا خَالِدِينَ. So enter it and dwell therein forever. فَادْخُلُوهَا خَالِدِينَ. And this person will say, الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي صَدَقَنَا وَعْدَهُ. That praise be to the one who has kept his promise. وَأَوْرَثَنَا الْأَرْضِ, and has made us inherit this land, i.e. Al-Firdaus. وَأَوْرَثَنَا الْأَرْضِ نَتَبَوَّأُ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ حَيْثُ نَشَاءُ. We can dwell in here forever and however we like. فَنِعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ. And great is that the reward of such a person who works towards this. وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي صَدَقَنَا وَعْدَهُ وَتَرَى الْمَلَائِكَةَ حَافِينَ مِنْ حَوْلِ الْعَرْشِ يُسَبِّحُونَ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِمْ. The angels are just there praising their Lord around the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it will be said, وَقِيلَ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That praise be to the one, the Lord of the Alameen. What does this hadith teach us, brothers and sisters? There is still time, insha'Allah, for you to put this Qur'an to your memory. Put this Qur'an to your memory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need a single one of us to memorize the Qur'an in order to preserve the Qur'an. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Qur'an, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already made this promise and has taken it upon himself subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve his book. It is our choice, brothers and sisters, to be a part of that preservation. To be a part of that preservation, insha'Allah. It is never too late. No age is an excuse to memorize the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just to encourage you, when I was memorizing the book of Allah, there was one student and his age was 55. And he did not memorize the Qur'an in 2 years. This is a big thing. If you can memorize the Qur'an at the age of 55 in 2 or 3 years. He completed the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the start to the end in 2 months. 2 months, subhanallah. And the youngest was 7 years old. And I remember that somebody once asked Shaykh Haytham al-Haddad this question, and they asked him, when should I start teaching my son the book of Allah, i.e. reciting and memorizing? And Shaykh asked him the question, and he says, how old is your son? And he says 5. And you might be thinking, now is the time. And Shaykh Haytham al-Haddad hafidhullah said, now it is too late. Has he started yet? No, it is too late. 5 years old, subhanallah. If that's too late, that's where it starts, my brothers, even before 5. And it even starts before the child is born, subhanallah, believe it or not. It all starts from the parents. And the parents, it is up to them to do their work, insha'Allah, in order to recite the Qur'an as frequently as possible and to memorize the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as regularly as possible, insha'Allah, so you can benefit your children and the community, insha'Allah, and yourselves. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us and to make us the bearers of the Qur'an, so that it benefits us in the dunya and the akhirah, and that it becomes an intercessor for us on the day of judgment. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad.